The alien hall was silent and cold, with walls made of black stone and metal that seemed to drink the light from above, and the smell of strange oils and the faint sound of humming power filled the air like a warning, and dozens of alien cadets sat in rows, their eyes bright and sharp, their hands resting on their knees as if they were carved from stone. At the center of the room stood a long table of silver, and on it rested a strange box about the size of a helmet, made from metal that shifted color as the light touched it, and its surface was covered with tiny lines and patterns that seemed to move when looked at too long, and it gave the feeling that it was not just an object, but something alive waiting for the right moment to act. The alien instructor walked forward, tall and covered in green armor plates that reflected the dim light, and his long, thin face showed no emotion, and his eyes glowed faintly yellow as he placed both hands on the box, and his voice, when it came, was deep and smooth, but carried a weight that made the cadets straighten even more in their seats. "This is the trial," he said in his slow alien tone. "This puzzle box is a relic from a species long gone from this galaxy. It has passed through many hands over centuries, and no one has solved it. It does not respond to force or to machines, only to the mind that understands it. You will try, and if you fail, you will step aside for the next." The cadets exchanged quick glances, their expressions tense and proud, for this was more than a test. It was a chance to prove they were worthy of the highest honor in the academy, a rank given only to those who could master both the mind and the will. The instructor lifted the box slightly and set it down again, and the sound it made against the table was not like metal, but like a bell ringing far away. And then he stepped back and gestured for the first cadet to approach. The first alien was tall, with skin like rough stone and fingers that split into 3 sharp tips. He reached for the box with care, turning it and pressing its patterns, but nothing happened, and after a few long minutes the instructor told him to return to his seat, and another cadet stepped forward, and then another, and then another. Each one failed, and the tension in the hall grew like a storm waiting to break, and the whispers began. Some spoke in their own alien tongue, sharp clicks and low growls, and others in the common language, saying, "No one can open it, and this is just a trick to humble us." In the back row a human cadet sat with his arms folded, his head tilted slightly as he watched, and his name was Daniel Reeve, and he had been quiet since the trial began. He had the look of someone who was not worried at all, and his eyes followed every movement of the others, not with envy or fear, but with calm interest. The instructor's gaze fell on him at last, and the silence deepened as the tall alien spoke. "You human, your turn." Daniel stood slowly, his boots making soft sounds against the floor as he walked to the table, and he could feel every alien eye on him, some filled with doubt, some with curiosity, and some with quiet dislike, for the human was the only one of his kind in the room, and many believed he did not belong here at all. He stopped before the table and looked down at the box, not touching it yet, and for a long moment he just studied it, tracing the patterns with his eyes, and noticing the way some lines were thicker than others, the way the colors shifted like ripples on water, the way a faint vibration ran through it as if something inside was alive and breathing. The instructor stood behind him, arms crossed, his voice calm. "Let us see what you can do." Daniel finally placed his hands on the box, his fingers brushing over the cold surface, and the hum beneath the metal grew slightly louder, as if it felt his touch, and he smiled faintly, almost too small to notice, then began to turn the box slowly, feeling for points of resistance, pressing lightly along the grooves and edges, moving with patience that made the others restless. The alien cadets leaned forward, trying to see what he was doing, and a low murmur filled the hall, though no one dared speak loudly, and the instructor watched in silence, his yellow eyes narrowing just a little. Daniel tilted his head, listening to something no one else could hear, or maybe to nothing at all, and his fingers moved faster, now sliding one panel aside, then pressing down on a small ridge that no one else had touched, and a faint pulse of light shimmered across the surface for the briefest second. A few cadets gasped, and one whispered that never happened before. Daniel kept working, his eyes focused, his breathing slow, his hands moving like he already knew the answer, and the instructor shifted, slightly, his voice low and sharp. "What did you just do, human?" Daniel did not answer. He only kept working as if the question had not been asked, and the hum inside the box was now clear enough for everyone to hear, a strange deep sound like the echo of a faraway engine or the heartbeat of some ancient creature. The instructor stepped closer, his shadow falling over the human. "Let us see if you can finish what you started." And in that moment the air in the hall seemed to tighten, and the faint lights along the walls dimmed as if the box itself was drawing in power, waiting for something to happen. Every eye in the alien hall was fixed on Daniel as he stood over the strange puzzle box, his hands hovering just above its surface. The metal shimmered under the dim lights, as if alive, the shifting colors, sliding like liquid silver over its skin, and the faint vibration coming from within seemed to whisper that it knew it was being watched, and it knew who was watching it. Daniel did not rush. He moved his hand slowly, letting his fingertips pass above the surface, without touching. Yet the alien cadets grew restless, their heads tilting, their strange eyes narrowing in suspicion. Some whispered among themselves in clicks and growls, others in the common tongue, saying the human is wasting time, or the human fears the touch, or the human does not know where to start. The alien instructor stood behind Daniel, his tall, armored frame unmoving, but his glowing yellow eyes watching every motion. The silence in the hall was deep and heavy. The only sound was the soft hum of the box and the slow, even breath of the human cadet as he studied it. Daniel bent closer, and his reflection bent with him in the shifting metal. The patterns were not random. He saw that now lines flowed like rivers, meeting at points that looked like they might be pressed or turned, each point slightly different, as if telling a story in a language of shapes and grooves. Without looking away, he spoke quietly, almost to himself. It is not just a puzzle, it is a memory. Someone made this to remember something. The instructor's voice came deep and calm. Speak louder, human. The others cannot hear you. Daniel ignored the request, his fingers at last making contact with the metal. It was cold at first, but as he kept his touch, the surface grew warmer, as if it knew the warmth of his skin and was answering with its own warmth. He pressed lightly at one of the thicker grooves, feeling a subtle give beneath it. He turned it slightly, and a faint ripple moved across the surface, like a drop of water falling into a still pond. The hum deepened, and the alien cadets shifted in their seats, murmuring in surprise, for no one before had made it react so quickly. Daniel's other hand slid along the opposite edge of the box, tracing the patterns in reverse, as if his fingers knew where to go. Without thought, he pressed another hidden point, and the ripple of energy spread wider, now like invisible waves, pushing against the air itself. The lights on the walls flickered for a moment, and the instructor's eyes narrowed further. "What are you doing, human?" he asked, his tone still calm, but with an edge beneath it. Daniel still did not answer. Instead, he began to rotate a panel that had been flush with the surface, and the alien cadets leaned forward, some standing from their seats, to see the impossible, for the panel moved without resistance, as if inviting the turn, and as it turned, a low tone sounded from deep inside the box, a tone that vibrated in the bones of everyone present. The instructor's long fingers twitched slightly as if ready to step in, but he stayed back, watching the human work. The cadets whispered, their voices carrying disbelief and frustration. How can the human do what the rest of us could not? What is he hearing? What is he seeing? Daniel's eyes stayed locked on the shifting colors and the patterns beneath his touch. He had solved many puzzles before as a child on Earth, strange toys, given by his grandfather, toys that came from places he never named, toys that had patterns not unlike these, and Daniel realized that those toys might not have been from Earth at all. The box now responded to every movement of his hands, panels shifting, grooves deepening, and flattening lines sliding into new shapes. He was not forcing it, he was guiding it, as if helping it remember how to be whole again. And each change brought a new tone, a new vibration, a new shift of color, until the entire box seemed to breathe with him. The instructor finally spoke again, more sharply. "Now, human, you are not authorized to tamper with unknown relics beyond the limits of the trial." Daniel only tilted his head slightly, a faint smile at the corner of his mouth, his hands moving faster, now both working together in perfect rhythm, pressing, sliding, turning, in ways no alien here had thought to try. The tones from within the box were now forming a pattern of their own, rising and falling like the notes of a song. The cadets fell into a deeper silence, sensing something in those tones, something old, something that made the air feel heavy and cold, as if they stood at the mouth of a great cave in deep shadow. Daniel's fingers paused for just a second, and in that pause every eye was on him. The instructor took a step forward, a shadow falling over the table, and in that moment Daniel pressed one final point, and there was a sudden sharp click like the snapping of a lock that had been waiting centuries to break. The hum stopped, the tones vanished, the colors froze into a single pale silver, and the entire hall felt the change in the air, a stillness so deep it seemed nothing moved at all, not even the breath in their lungs. And then, with a slow pulse of light, the box began to glow from within. The light was not bright, but soft and blue, spilling out through the thin seams along its surface, the glow pulsing like a heartbeat. Daniel's eyes reflected the blue as he leaned closer, almost whispering to it, "You are awake now." The instructor's voice was low. "What did you do, human?" Daniel did not look up. The glow grew stronger, the pulses faster, and the seams of the box widened just slightly enough to show something within, something moving like liquid crystal, shifting and swirling, as if alive. The cadets gasped, some stepping back, some stepping forward. With wide eyes, the instructor held up a hand, warning them not to move closer. The glow shifted from blue to deep violet, and a faint sound came with it, not the hum from before, but a sound like a voice whispering from far away. It was not in any language they knew, but Daniel froze, as if he understood every word. The instructor saw the human's expression change, his calm focus now sharpened to something more intense, almost reverent. The voice whispered again, the tones curling through the air like smoke. Only Daniel reacted, his lips parting as if to answer, and the instructor took another step forward, his own unease now clear. "What is it saying to you?" Daniel did not answer, his hands resting on the box, feeling its warmth. Like a living thing, his eyes locked on the shifting violet light inside the seams, and then the whisper came again, softer this time, almost tender, and Daniel's breath caught. The instructor called his name sharply, "Daniel Reeve." Daniel turned his head slightly enough for the instructor to see the faintest smile still on his face, and he spoke at last in a quiet voice. "It is not a puzzle at all, it is a greeting." Before the instructor could respond, the light flared so suddenly that every cadet shielded their eyes, and the box gave a deep resonant tone that shook the floor. The seams opened a little wider, and something inside began to stir. And then the whispering voice spoke again, but this time it was not soft, it was clear, it was loud enough for every being in the hall to hear. "Welcome, traveler." The word echoed through the alien hall in a voice that was not a voice, but a sound woven with meaning and light, and for a heartbeat, no one moved. The cadets stood frozen, the instructor stood frozen, Daniel stood with his hands still resting on the warm surface of the box, and the violet glow spilling from its seams painted their faces in shifting shadows and strange colors. The sound had weight to it, not just a greeting, but something deeper, like a door swinging open in the mind, and Daniel felt it pulling at him, as if the voice was not coming from a box at all, but from somewhere far away, somewhere beyond the walls of the academy, beyond the stars, beyond anything he had known before. The cadets began to murmur, their voices uneasy, some stepping back, their hands twitching toward the small blades and tools they carried, as if this small object on the table could suddenly leap at them. The instructor raised one hand, and the hall fell silent again, though the air now carried a hum that seemed to sink into the bones of everyone present. Daniel leaned closer, his eyes narrowing at the glow within the box. The patterns on the outside were still moving, now shifting more quickly, each line bending and reforming like rivers changing course, and he realized they were not random at all. They were forming shapes that looked almost like maps. The instructor spoke, his voice low and careful. "Human, step away from it. Now you have passed the limit of the trial." Daniel did not move. The warmth under his hands was growing, the hum rising until it was almost a song, and somewhere inside that song he thought he heard words faint and strange, and yet he knew them as if they had always been waiting in some hidden part of his mind. The cadets leaned forward, some in fascination, some in fear. One of them, a tall, thin creature with skin like glass, whispered that the relic was responding to him alone, that no one else could hear what it said. The others muttered about ancient traps and forgotten curses. The instructor silenced them with a glare, but even he kept his distance, now his posture tense, as though ready to move in an instant. Daniel's fingers began to move again, not in the deliberate slow way of before, but as if following instructions he could not see or hear, his hands sliding across the surface, pressing in certain places, turning hidden panels that responded like old machinery, remembering how to work after a long sleep. With every movement the hum changed, the light inside grew brighter, and the shapes on the outside shifted faster. The instructor called to him again, "Daniel Reeve, this is your final warning." But his voice was met with no sign of obedience. Daniel's gaze was fixed on the shifting light, as if it were a star in deep darkness, and he could not look away. Then, without warning, the box gave a sound like a deep bell rung in the center of the room, the vibration spreading through the floor and into their feet. The seams widened further, and a faint mist began to drift out, curling into the air in slow tendrils. It was not smoke, and not steam, something else entirely, something that caught the light in strange ways, so it seemed both solid and not. The cadets instinctively drew back, their faces tight. With unease, the instructor did not move, but his eyes burned with sharp focus on the box. Daniel leaned forward, breathing in the strange air, and his eyes widened, his pupils tightening sharply, as if he had just seen something vast and impossible. The hum deepened, and then a sudden pulse of light shot upward from the open seams, forming a column in the air above the box. The column twisted and spread, and from it an image began to form, an image of stars, not as they were seen from the academy, but from somewhere far away. A field of suns scattered across blackness, and among them a single bright star burned red and alone. The cadets whispered again, some naming the star, some saying it did not exist in their charts, some saying it was in a forbidden sector. The instructor's eyes narrowed further as he recognized the shape of the star field, and his voice grew cold. That is not possible. That sector is sealed and lost. Daniel's voice was quiet but sure as he spoke. Without looking away, it is not lost, it has been waiting. The instructor took a step closer, his armor whispering against itself as he moved. Human, do you know what that place is? Daniel shook his head slightly. The light of the star map painting strange shadows across his face, but he felt in his bones that it was calling to him, not to the instructor, not to the cadets, only to him. The hum of the box had become a rhythm, like a heartbeat, and it matched his own, as if syncing with him completely. The image of the red star began to change, lines of light growing outward from it, forming paths, like roads through space, each one connecting to other stars. But some paths were broken, others faded, and only one remained bright, leading away into the darkness, toward a point the image did not reveal. The mist curling in the air began to move faster, drawn upward into the map, as if feeding it, and the cadets could feel a faint pull in the air, as if gravity itself was leaning toward the box. One of them shouted to destroy it before it pulled them all inside. The instructor barked at them to hold position, but his own hands twitched at his sides, as if ready to act. Daniel finally looked away from the map, his gaze locking on the instructor's eyes, his voice steady and calm. It is showing me the way. The instructor stepped forward until the edge of his shadow touched Daniel's boots. The way to what? Daniel looked back to the map, the red star pulsing like a signal beacon, and beyond it a faint glow like something hidden, just out of reach. The voice inside his mind spoke again, but this time it was slower, more deliberate, more personal. The path is yours alone, traveler. The hum shifted once more, the patterns on the outside of the box aligning into a perfect circle. For the first time the instructor's expression changed, slightly, a flicker of something that might have been recognition or fear. His voice dropped lower. Where does that path end, human? Daniel turned to him again, and for a long moment he said nothing. Then he spoke with the same calm as before. I do not think it ends, I think it begins. The moment the words left his mouth, the red star in the projection flared so brightly that the cadets staggered back, shielding their eyes. The mist vanished into the light. The hum rose to a deep roar that shook the walls, and the seams of the box widened until the top half began to lift, as if opening on its own. Inside was no mechanism, no wires, no gears, only a sphere of pure light, swirling with patterns like storms on a distant planet. The sphere floated above the base of the box, turning slowly and casting strange shadows that moved like living things across the walls and floor. The voice came again, not in a whisper now, but in a tone that felt like it was coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. You have opened the first gate, traveler. Will you walk the path? Daniel's hands tightened slightly on the edges of the box, his eyes fixed on the sphere. The instructor took one more step forward, his voice sharp. Human, answer carefully. Daniel leaned closer to the light, and when he spoke his voice was quiet, but certain. Yes. The light swelled in answer, filling the hall until nothing could be seen but white. The white light did not blind, it wrapped around the hall like a soft mist, yet it carried weight, as if the air itself had thickened, and every cadet felt their hearts slow under its presence. The walls of the academy chamber seemed to dissolve into nothing, until there was no ceiling, no floor, only endless space, filled with drifting points of light and shapes too distant to name. Daniel stood at the center, still touching the base of the box, though now the box seemed part of something larger, its edges blending into the glowing floor beneath his feet, his shadow stretching in all directions, as if there were many versions of him, each cast toward a different star. The voice returned, but it was no longer a whisper. It was not even a sound in the normal sense. It was something that pressed directly into the mind, each word carrying a weight of memory and time that could not belong to any living being. Welcome, traveler. You have opened what others have feared to touch for longer than your kind has walked among the stars. Daniel felt the pull in the words, a slow current drawing him toward understanding, and he spoke not with his mouth, but with thought. What are you? The answer came not in a single statement, but in layers. The first a simple truth, I am a record. The second a deeper truth, I am a key. And the third a truth that pulsed with power, I am a path. Around him the drifting lights shifted, forming images, some bright and near, some distant and faint. He saw vast cities that floated in the void, untouched by planets. He saw ships the size of moons sailing through storms of cosmic dust. He saw creatures that were not flesh nor metal, but something between, something older than both, and all of them flickered like fragments of a memory left too long in shadow. The instructor's voice cut through the vision, though it sounded far away. Human, step back now before it binds to you. But Daniel did not move. The voice in his mind was stronger, and it spoke again. Your kind was not meant to find this yet, but the shape of your thought is the shape the gate remembers, and so it is opened for you. Daniel felt a shiver run through him. The gate remembers. That phrase echoed again and again as the drifting images shifted into patterns, maps of stars, just as before, but now clearer. The red star pulsed at the center, and from it the same single path extended, yet beyond it there was more faint threads of light branching outward like veins of some living thing. He asked, what lies at the end of this path? The answer came in a single unbroken wave of thought, the origin. The instructor stepped closer, his form now just a dark outline against the glow, his voice tight. The origin is a myth. Daniel shook his head without turning toward him. It is not a myth, it is here. The voice filled him again. The path is not without trial. Others have walked part of it, none have walked its whole length. Their remains are the dust between the stars, but you may yet walk it if you choose. Daniel felt the weight of the choice pressing against his thoughts, and for a moment he imagined turning away, imagined letting the instructor close the box and seal away this impossible map. But something deeper within him pushed back, a quiet certainty that the box had been waiting not just for a human but for him. The cadets were murmuring now, their shapes vague in the glow, some urging him to step away, others telling the instructor to seize the relic before it did more damage. One voice called out that the human was being deceived. Another shouted that this was power meant only for the academy. The instructor silenced them all with a single gesture, but his gaze did not leave Daniel. The voice inside Daniel's mind shifted in tone, now softer, yet somehow heavier. The path will change you. You will not return the same. If you return at all, the gate will test you in ways that no chart, no lesson, no training can prepare you for. Daniel asked, why me? Because you are not bound by what the others believe. The voice replied, you do not carry the weight of their history. You walk lightly enough to cross the bridge without breaking it. The vision around him began to fade, the stars dimming, the shapes of ancient ships and cities dissolving into mist, until only the red star remained pulsing like a heartbeat. And beyond it the faint image of a great door standing in the void, carved with symbols of many species. Some Daniel recognized from academy records, others were so alien they seemed to shift whenever he tried to focus on them. And at the center of the door was a human handprint glowing faintly, as if waiting for his touch. The instructor spoke again, his voice low enough that only Daniel could hear. Do you understand what this means? If that door exists, and if it was made with a human mark, then your kind has touched this galaxy far earlier than anyone knows. Daniel met his gaze for the first time since the light had flared, his own voice steady. Then maybe it is time to know why. The voice in his mind pulsed once more with a final thought before the light began to fade. If you wish to walk the path, take the key, hold it close, for it will guide you through the dark. The glow around them began to pull inward, collapsing into the sphere of light above the box, the walls and floor of the academy hall returning piece by piece, as if reality was being rebuilt around them. The cadets blinked against the dimness. After the brilliance, the instructor straightened his armor plates, and the hum faded to silence. Only the box remained changed. Now the seams were gone. The patterns had aligned into a single flowing design that seemed to move even in stillness, and within it the sphere of light hovered smaller than before, yet somehow heavier in presence. Daniel reached out, and the sphere settled into his palm, without resistance, warm and steady, as if it had been waiting there all along. The instructor's voice was hard, now human. That is no longer a simple trial piece. That is an artifact of unknown power. It belongs to the academy. Daniel closed his fingers around it, feeling the quiet pulse against his skin. I think it belongs to the path, and the path belongs to me. The cadets erupted in argument, voices overlapping with anger, fear, and awe. Some demanded the instructor take it by force. Others whispered that they had seen history change in front of their eyes. The instructor silenced them again, but his gaze stayed locked on Daniel. The voice no longer spoke in his mind, but he felt it still, like a quiet pressure in the back of his thoughts, reminding him of the red star, reminding him of the door, reminding him of the choice he had already made. The instructor finally said, "Then you leave me no choice," and took a step forward, his armor whispering, the cadets holding their breath. But before he could move again, the sphere in Daniel's hand flared just enough to cast his shadow across the whole hall, and the air itself seemed to bend for a heartbeat, as if warning them all that the choice had already been made. The sphere in Daniel's hand pulsed again, slow and steady like the beat of a living heart, and its glow spread across his fingers, wrapping them in shifting threads of gold and blue. The cadets stared in silence, some with awe, others with unease, as if each pulse carried something they could feel in their bones, but could not name. The instructor stood still, yet his entire frame was tense, his eyes locked on the small object, as though it were a weapon aimed at all of them. Daniel lifted the sphere just enough for the light to spill onto the surface of the table, and in that light the patterns on the metal rippled, shifting like water, disturbed by an unseen wind. Then from the sphere a single beam of pale light stretched outward, striking the far wall of the hall, and in that instant the wall dissolved, replaced by the image of space, so real it felt like the air itself had opened to its stars, hanging in endless blackness, and among them the red star burning with its steady, unblinking glow. Gasps moved through the cadets, some stepping forward, drawn by the vision, others stepping back, as if the sight carried danger. The instructor did not move, but his voice was hard, human. "What are you doing?" Daniel shook his head slowly. "It is not me, it is the sphere. It is showing us." The light shifted now, bending and twisting until it formed a structure in the void, a vast ring of metal and stone hanging in space the size of a small moon, its surface covered in symbols too large to be decoration, each one etched deep and glowing faintly, as if lit from within. Sections of the ring appeared broken, as if torn by forces far beyond the power of ships or weapons, and yet it still turned slowly around the red star, its motion steady, like the pendulum of a great clock. One of the cadets whispered that they had seen this in a forbidden archive. Another muttered that it was only a legend. The ring at the edge. The instructor's gaze hardened, and he cut them both to silence, his voice quiet, but sharp enough to hold the hall still. That ring was said to guard the approach to the origin. It is not meant to be found. Daniel kept his eyes on the vision, the beam of light from the sphere shifting again, now moving through the ring and beyond into deeper darkness, until it reached a place where the black was broken by something vast and dim as shape, like a wall stretching across space itself. So far it seemed endless, on either side carved with lines of light that formed patterns no mind could fully hold. The cadets whispered again, their voices low like those in a temple. This time no one silenced them, for the vision itself carried weight enough to press the room into reverence. Daniel felt the pull of that wall in his mind, the same pull he had felt when the box had first awakened, as if it was not just an image, but something alive and aware and waiting. The sphere pulsed once more, and the vision moved closer until the wall filled everything, and there at its center was the great door he had seen before, carved with symbols from 100 alien tongues, and in its heart the shape of a human handprint, glowing faint gold. The instructor's voice broke the silence. "This is impossible. No human civilization has ever existed in the records of that era." Daniel glanced at him briefly. "Maybe the records are wrong." The instructor took a slow step forward, his eyes fixed on the glowing handprint. "If this is real, it means the first builders, the ones who shaped the core routes of this galaxy, they knew your kind before your kind knew the stars. It means the history every academy in the coalition teaches is only a shadow of the truth." Daniel's attention turned back to the vision. The door felt closer, now, as if he could reach out and touch it, yet the sphere's light did not let him move toward it. Instead, the beam pulled back, carrying them away, until the door became a single point of gold on the vast wall, and then the wall itself faded into darkness, leaving only the red star at the center of the void. The instructor stepped closer to Daniel, his voice low and measured. You understand what this means. If you take this sphere, if you follow this path, you will not be walking into an empty place. You will be stepping into the oldest secret in known space, and it will not be unguarded. Daniel kept his gaze steady. I know. The light from the sphere dimmed slightly, as if resting after what it had shown, but Daniel could still feel its warmth, and in his mind the echo of the voice that had spoken to him before was still there, quiet, but certain. The path is open. The cadets began to speak again, some arguing that the sphere must be locked away under coalition control, others urging that the human be allowed to follow it in the name of discovery. The noise grew until the instructor raised his voice enough to cut through it all. We will not decide this in chaos. He turned to Daniel, and for a long moment they held each other's gaze. The hall was silent again. Even the faint hum from a wall seemed to fade, and then the instructor said, the choice will be yours alone, but you must make it knowing that once you step onto that path, there will be no return, not to this place, not to the life you know, not to the safety of the academy. Daniel's hand tightened around the sphere, the weight of the moment heavy in his chest, but there was no doubt. There had never been doubt from the first moment. He had touched the box and felt its hum. He knew it had not been a test at all, it had been a calling. I will go, he said simply. The cadets erupted again, voices overlapping with shocked disbelief and even admiration. The instructor did not silence them this time. He simply turned his head slightly, as if listening to something distant, then back to Daniel. So be it, but if you go, you will go now. The path is open, and paths like this do not stay open for long. As if in answer, the sphere in Daniel's hand brightened, and a new beam of light swept across the hall, striking the far doors. They swung open on their own, though no one had touched them. Beyond them was not the familiar stone corridors of the academy, but a wide platform under open night sky, and in that sky a single ship hovered, its hull black as the void, but outlined by thin glowing veins of gold matching the light of the sphere. The cadets fell into stunned silence, some stepping forward to see it better. The instructor's gaze stayed on Daniel. The ship is here for you. Daniel stepped toward the open doors, the sphere still in his hand, its light steady and sure, as if guiding his steps. He felt the air grow cooler, the stars overhead brighter, and as he reached the threshold, he looked back once to see the instructor still standing by the table, his expression unreadable, the cadets watching with every shade of emotion possible. Then Daniel stepped out onto the platform. The ship lowered slightly, a ramp extending toward him. Without sound, the gold veins along its hull pulsing in time with the sphere in his hand. The voice spoke once more in his mind, not as a question, but as a truth. The journey begins. The ramp of the ship stretched down like the tongue of some great silent beast, its surface smooth and dark, but alive with thin golden lines that shifted and pulsed in perfect rhythm with the sphere in Daniel's hand. The night air on the platform was still, yet carried a faint scent of ozone and something older, something that spoke of places beyond the reach of any star chart. The cadets stood frozen just inside the open hall, their faces lit by the glow of the ship and the sphere, some showing envy, others fear, and some a deep hunger for what lay beyond. Daniel took a slow step forward, feeling the surface of the ramp vibrate under his boot. As if the ship recognized him, his gaze stayed fixed on the dark opening at the top, where the golden lines converged into a soft pulsing light. The voice in his mind was silent now, but its presence was not gone. It waited like a breath held too long, ready to speak. When the time came, the instructor stepped onto the platform, his long frame casting a shadow across the ramp. He did not draw a weapon, though some of the cadets had likely expected it. Instead, his voice came low and level. Human, before you step onto that ship, I will tell you what the academy will not follow. The path is not a single road, it is a maze. It will lead you through places meant to be forgotten, places built to keep you from the door you saw. The path will not test your skill alone, it will test your reason, your memory of why you began. Daniel stopped with one foot on the ramp, meeting the instructor's gaze. You think I will not come back? The instructor's yellow eyes glowed faintly in the dark. It is not what I think it is. What the path does it changes those who walk it. None who return are the same, and many do not return at all. A murmur spread through the cadets behind him. some whispering of old tales of explorers, swallowed by invisible doors, others speaking of the ring around the red star. As a trap, Daniel listened, but felt no fear, only the same quiet certainty that had guided his hands when he first touched the box. "If it changes me, then it changes me," he said, "and that is better than staying and never knowing." The instructor regarded him for a long moment, then gave a single slow nod, as if accepting the inevitability of the choice, but his voice sharpened to a final warning. "The sphere will guide you, but it will also judge you. If you falter, it will close the path." Daniel tightened his grip on it, feeling the steady pulse in his palm. "I will not falter." He turned back toward the ramp and began to walk, the golden lines brightening with each step, as though marking his progress. The ship remained silent, yet the air seemed to thicken around him, carrying the weight of the decision forward, and behind him the cadets watched a living piece of history walk out of their reach. At the base of the ramp, Daniel paused once more, looking up into the opening, and the sphere in his hand pulsed stronger, sending a faint ripple of light up the ramp into the ship. The golden veins responded like roots drinking in water. Daniel climbed the first step, and then another, the ramp smooth but steady beneath him, the pulse of the sphere and the ship now matching his heartbeat. Halfway up, he looked back one last time. The instructor stood unmoving on the platform, framed by the light from the hall. The cadets crowded behind him, their expressions a mirror of their own fears and desires. Daniel's gaze swept across them all, and then he turned back, without a word, climbing the last steps into the dark. Inside the ship, the air was cool and faintly metallic, the walls curved and seamless, their surface alive with flowing golden lines. The light from the entrance dimmed as the ramp withdrew behind him, sealing away the platform, the academy, the entire world he had known, replaced now by the hum of the vessel itself, a low, constant sound that seemed to come from every direction. The voice returned in his mind, not like before, not as a whisper or command, but as a presence speaking from within the hum. "You have chosen, and the path has accepted your choice." Daniel felt the deck beneath his feet shift slightly, as though the ship was waking from a long rest. The lines on the walls brightened, running forward into the unseen heart of the vessel, guiding him deeper. He followed the light down a narrow corridor that curved gently with the shape of the ship, the hum growing stronger as he walked, until he entered a chamber. At its center, the chamber was empty except for a single raised platform, and above it hung a hollow sphere of light larger than the one in his hand, spinning slowly, and inside it were shapes of stars moving in slow rotation, the red star at their center glowing brighter than the rest. "Place the key," the voice said. Daniel stepped forward and lifted the smaller sphere, placing it into the heart of the larger one. It settled into place, without sound, the two lights merging until they were one, and in that instant the ship seemed to breathe a deep intake of air as the chamber filled with projections of star systems and paths, lines of light running between them, some broken, some whole, all leading toward the same single point, the red star. The ship began to move, though Daniel felt no vibration, no thrust, only the gentle pull of motion, as the walls of the chamber shifted into a view of the space beyond the stars, beginning to slide slowly past the hull. The golden lines within the ship pulsed in steady rhythm with the path ahead. The voice spoke again. "The first trial waits before the ring. You must pass it to enter the shadow of the star." Daniel stood at the center of the chamber, watching the stars draw nearer, feeling the weight of what lay ahead, and behind him the door to the world he had known was gone. Ahead was the path that could not be unwalked. The ship's hum deepened as if acknowledging the thought, and the golden light around him flared once, then steadied. The journey had begun. The ship moved like a shadow through the dark, its hull whispering against the silence of space, though no sound could truly be heard. The stars outside shifted slowly as the golden veins within the walls pulsed in quiet rhythm with the sphere, now merged into the heart of the vessel. Daniel stood in the central chamber, watching the vast black ahead, broken only by the red star growing brighter with every breath of the journey. The hum of the ship filled him like a second heartbeat, steady and certain. The voice came again, not in command, but in quiet guidance. "The path will not show itself to the unready, so the first trial waits where the light meets the shadow." Daniel kept his eyes on the red star, even as new shapes began to emerge at the edges of the view, small points at first, then larger, until their forms became clear. A line of massive objects hung in the void between him and the star, each one shaped like a jagged shard of obsidian, their surfaces glistening with faint light that moved like veins of silver. They were motionless, Yet their presence was heavy, as if each held the memory of something long dead. "They are guardians," the voice said. "They watch the ring, and they do not sleep." Daniel studied them as the ship drew closer, the shards slowly shifting position, though no engines or thrusters could be seen. The silver veins across their surfaces began to brighten, their glow pulsing in time with one another, until the space between them was filled with threads of light, forming a web so intricate it seemed impossible to pass without being caught. "You must pass without being touched," the voice continued. "Their light will judge your worth, and if they find you wanting, the path will close, and you will not see the ring." Daniel placed his hands on the smooth railing that encircled the chamber, the hum beneath his fingers shifting slightly as the ship responded to his intent. He had no controls, no levers, no will, only the link between himself and the vessel. Through the sphere's connection, the golden veins around him brightened as the ship slowed and began to move with careful grace toward the nearest opening in the glowing web. The shards reacted at once, their silver veins flaring brighter threads of light, shifting to block the gap, forcing Daniel to change course. The ship turned with him, gliding toward another opening, only for it to close. The guardians moved with a strange elegance, like predators circling prey. Daniel narrowed his eyes, focusing not on the gaps themselves, but on the rhythm of the light, the pulses between each flare. Each shift of the web had a pattern, not perfect, but close enough to predict. He waited, feeling the timing in his chest, letting it settle into him until he knew where the next opening would form. Now he thought, and the ship darted forward, slipping through. Just as the threads began to close again, the shards flared brighter, their positions shifting faster, the web tightening, as if sensing the danger of letting him pass. Daniel moved with the rhythm, now guiding the ship between the narrowing gaps, each one smaller than the last, the hum of the vessel rising with the speed until the final gap opened ahead. He pushed forward, the golden veins within the walls blazing with light, as the ship surged through the last thread before it could seal. The shards behind him dimmed their light, fading until they were only dark shapes. Once more the web gone, as if it had never been. "You have passed the first trial," the voice said, "and now the ring awaits." The space beyond the guardians opened wide, the red star now burning like a molten jewel, and around it the vast ring turned slowly, its broken edges catching the light like the teeth of some ancient machine. Even damaged, it was immense, filling the view from end to end, its surface etched with deep glowing lines that formed patterns so complex they seemed to shift the longer he looked at them. The ship slowed as it approached the outer edge of the ring. Daniel could see the fractured sections where whole pieces had been torn away, leaving gaps large enough to drift through. Yet even those gaps hummed faintly with power. The voice spoke again. "You will not pass through the open wound. The path requires the gate." Daniel's gaze moved along the curve of the ring until he saw at a section where the glowing lines converged into a great arch, its center dark and still, yet filled with a pressure that made his chest tighten. The ship moved toward it on its own, the golden veins along the walls matching the patterns of the ring, as if in greeting. When they reached the gate, the pressure grew stronger, the darkness within the arch deepening until it felt less like an absence of light and more like a depth, a tunnel into something far beyond the space around them. The voice came once more. "If you cross, you will not be able to turn back." Daniel stepped closer to the view, his reflection faint in the transparent surface before him, his eyes fixed on the arch. "I did not come to turn back." The gate flared suddenly, the darkness within blooming with gold light shaped into the same human handprint he had seen on the door beyond the red star. The sight filled the chamber, casting his shadow across the walls. The hum of the ship became a low, steady tone, and the voice in his mind was quieter, now almost reverent. "The ring remembers." Daniel placed his palm against the transparent surface as the ship drifted into alignment with the glowing mark. The sphere's pulse quickened in his chest, the light of the mark spilling over his hand until it seemed his flesh itself was turning to gold. Then, without sound, the ship passed through the gate, and the light swallowed them. The world beyond was not empty space, but a corridor of stars, a narrow band of light and shadow twisting toward a distant point. The red star burned at its heart, and beyond it, in faint outline, the great wall loomed. The golden veins within the ship dimmed to a soft glow, as if conserving their strength for what lay ahead. Daniel stood in silence, watching the path unfold. The voice was gone now, leaving only the hum of the ship and the steady pull forward in his chest each moment bringing the wall closer, the handprint on its great door glowing faintly even from this distance. He felt it calling him, as it had from the first moment he touched the box in the academy hall. The journey had begun long before the ship had come for him, long before the box had awakened, and he knew now that whatever waited behind that door would not simply be an answer, it would be the reason the question had been asked at all. The wall grew larger in the view, its lines of light sharp and endless across the void. The golden veins within the ship brightened. Once more the hum deepened, and Daniel took a breath, knowing that soon the path would end at the place where it had always meant to. And he would be the one to open it.